podcast. In. All right. Rick, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure being on your podcast.
Yeah, I've listened to your podcast as well. I'm going to ask you about that in a second. You've got a great show that you host as well. But before I get to that, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in this whole world of Microsoft Dynamics.
Well, I can say I'm a CRM guy. Been in CRM business for over 25 years now. Got started back in the 90s when we had things called contact management. Then we became Salesforce automation. And then all of a sudden someone said, we're going to call it CRM. And I said, okay, we'll call it CRM. And off we go. So I had a company called Archer Systems. We merged with another company around 2000. And I kind of played around a little bit in the Salesforce.com world, NetSuite, SalesLogix world, but then I kind of landed when Microsoft came out with their Dynamics CRM product around 2004.
Okay, great. So you've been in the space for quite some time. You've seen a lot of change, I imagine, a lot of evolution of the product and the ecosystem and all that good stuff.
A lot of things changed, but a lot of things stay the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get to the things that have changed and the things that have stayed the same, I also want to make sure that we talk about your Partner Talks podcast. And this is how I discovered you and learned about you. Tell us about the podcast. First of all, tell us about the podcast.
So Partner Talks is a show that I developed probably around 2020. So we were, playing around with the idea that, I was being invited on to these other podcasts. I'm a Microsoft MVP, did a lot of speaking at all the Microsoft conferences, especially around the partner conferences. And people were interviewing me. I'm going, well, it doesn't look that hard. So I went on YouTube and learned how to do it and got a microphone and got some software and started interviewing some of my friends that worked for Microsoft. And we figured it out and we started producing it once a week and we just passed the 200 mark. So these are short format, around 10 minutes each. And it's really talking to Microsoft partners, Microsoft employees, and other people in our ecosystem that are influencers about the world of business applications, which we know as Dynamics in the Microsoft world. And they just tell me about their business and who they are and what they do.
Great. Yeah, and so that's why you're the perfect guest for this topic here today, talking about the ecosystem and how to find the right partner and how to navigate this complex and robust Microsoft ecosystem that they've built. But based on all these, you said 200 episodes, right? You just hit your 200th
Yes,
episode?
we just passed the 200th.
Do you have one in particular that sort of stands out as a most memorable, or maybe just your favorite guest or discussion or topic that you covered in that podcast?
No, but you'll see some of the longer ones I have. So some will go on 12, 15, 20 minutes. And we just start to roll. I get on a good subject with somebody, and then you'll see some that are 3, 4, 5 minutes, right? People,
Right.
tell me who they are and what they do, and there's not much more to it. So I think if you look at the ones that are my longer format, probably going to be the best ones.
Yeah. Well, good. So we'll make sure the audience here checks out that podcast as well. And again, that's called Partner Talks Podcast with Rick McCutcheon. So I guess just as getting started here on this whole thread of understanding and navigating the Microsoft Dynamics ecosystem, let's start off by talking about how important is it to find the right partner. I mean, Dynamics is a great product, right? Let's say we've all agreed that this is what we're going to implement in our organization. We're excited about it, but we know we need help. How important is it to find the right partner? Are they all kind of the same, or is there a
Well,
big
I think
variation?
it's crucial, right, to find the right partner because, we use the term dynamics and we use it loosely because dynamics, kind of covers the ERP and the CRM products that Microsoft offers. So on the ERP side, we've got the older products like Great Plains and Navision, which now Navision's kind of morphed into Business Central, which is their sort of mid-market play. And then you've got the enterprise finance and operations. So that's the ERP side, and I'm a CRM guy, right? So I played on the CRM side, which this is complicated, but it's built on what they call Dataverse, which is its low-code engine, which they use in the Power Apps world. So when you're looking to deploy Dynamics 365, sales, customer service, field service, those are all going to be Dataverse products. So you need to make sure that you have a partner that is very skilled with Dataverse and understands what we call first-party apps. which are the ones that I just mentioned.
Gotcha. Yeah, and the thing that I find so fascinating about the Microsoft world, the Microsoft Dynamics world, is how they've built such a broad and diverse and robust ecosystem. I mean, there are a ton of resellers out there, a ton of VARs and ISVs, which I'm going to come back to what an ISV is here in a few minutes. But compared to other systems, like when you look at SAP and Oracle and NetSuite and Workday, they have their own ecosystems, which are fairly robust. But I would argue that Microsoft has the most robust ecosystem in the enterprise technology space, simply because most of the selling is happening through their partners, and Microsoft has sort of not a hands-off approach, but it's very decentralized. They allow their ecosystem to flourish. But with that comes a lot of inequity or variation in the capabilities of different partners. Have you seen that as well? Or this is just my opinion of being independent
No,
and being
absolutely.
agnostic.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we start to look at the partner ecosystem, and a lot of times we'll talk about ISVs in a minute, but a big part of my business today as an MVP is I work with a lot of ISVs coming into the space to get them to understand, they want to build their products to attach to Dynamics. So just explaining to them what that is, it can be, a little bit complicated for them. So, we run into the same thing when we start, what are the skill sets? What are people able to do? Eric, what was the question? Sorry.
So it really wasn't a question. It's more of an observation around.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. Okay. Okay. So when we start to look at the Microsoft partner ecosystem and why it's developed, I'm going to say there's probably 100,000 partners that do B2B type business, that are organizations out there. When we start to look at the, sorry about that.
That's right. I'll mark wherever there's a edit needed, so we can cut that out.
So when we start to look at Dynamics or business applications, it starts to narrow, right? And you're going to really find that, the Great Plains partners specialize in that area. Business Central partners and Nav partner specialize in that area. And, CRM, CE partners specialize in their own areas. What's nice about Microsoft is they're partner friendly. So I can come in and say, I want to be a Microsoft partner. I can go to the partner portal and get all the information I need, all the training I need, all the software I need, everything I need to start a business. And there's lots of support, and there's things like Microsoft Learn. So I can come in and really specialize in that product and learn everything about it. And then there's this whole ecosystem of user communities, technical boards, all that built around the product. So if I decide one day I'm going to build a Business Central business, I can go and do that. And the infrastructure's there. There's no real barriers for doing it. And I think that's why we're seeing more and more partners that want to sell business applications come into our world.
Right. Yeah. And do you have any sense of how many resellers there are in the Microsoft Dynamics space worldwide, or maybe just in North America?
It's not an official number, but my searches on LinkedIn, I think we're probably around 20,000.
Okay. In worldwide or just in North America?
I think that's global.
Okay.
That do, maybe be a little higher when we start to look at Business Central, which are kind of the key ones: Business Central, the CRM, CE, and the F&O space. Okay. But there's a big movement happening out there, Eric, that we should talk about, and that's Power Apps, right? Okay. So when we start to look at the Power Platform, which they took the low-code engine under the CRM product and they took it out, and they decided we're going to build a low-code engine that any developer can use to build applications, and they don't have to buy what we call the first-party apps. So we're seeing a lot of the modern workplace, which is the Office partners, learning that product and coming into our space. So a lot of people that were building on SharePoint at one time, you'll see them now coming in and becoming Power Platform experts, Power Apps experts. So we're seeing that business applications world of the core first-party apps kind of sitting here, but it's a much bigger world when we start to look at, who's coming in from the modern workplace to start working with Power Platform. And that's why we're seeing when they have a conference around Power Platform, they're probably, and this is just a guesstimate, 50% of those people come out of my world, which is the business applications world, and probably half of them come out of the modern workplace. So that opens it up to many, many more partners.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, whether it's 20,000 or 30,000, whatever the number really is, I mean, that's a lot of it's a lot of partners to potentially navigate. And I know there's a lot of smaller shops that specialize in one industry or one geography or one application within the Microsoft Dynamics suite. So there's a lot of variables that go into sort of filtering out which ones are the right fit just from a skill set perspective. But when you back up and look at these thousands, tens of thousands of different partners that are out there, what are some of the top characteristics, top 2 or 3 qualities or skill sets or characteristics that buyers should be looking for when they're trying to evaluate these different partners?
So, and you sent me this question ahead of time, and I thought a lot about it. And I think it depends on the customer. How sophisticated a buyer are you? Is this your first deployment, or are you on your third deployment? We're also seeing a lot of our customers build a skill set internally to work with the product. So they have, maybe 4, 5, 10 people working in their organization, depending on the size, supporting the Dynamics installation. So they've got a good skill set, and a lot of them will bring in a partner when they want to do something very specific. So let's say I was going to put in field service, whether it's Microsoft's field service or more advanced product like Resco's. I'm going to get somebody with some experience around that field service product because my group doesn't have it. Or let's say we're going to start moving into our call centers because you're going to start integrating into a lot of ISV products. So you probably want to bring in that skill set for somebody who works in that world. And you'll find when you get into Dynamics, like I was a Salesforce automation guy, right? That's pretty much all I did. Someone had a customer service project or field service project. I got a Rolodex. Here's people that can help you. It's not me, right? Because I had my, my niche. And you're going to find a lot of the smaller partners have a niche, but they're tremendous at it, right? And they probably have a small team of 5 or 10 people that have been doing this for a dozen years who are very, very good. Where sometimes you get into a bigger firm, you don't know who you're going to get, right? So if I'm doing a field service rollout, what's the resume of the person that is going to be working with my team?
Right. And, one of those skill sets, I presume, is the technical skill sets. How competent are they in understanding these different applications and how to deploy the most recent versions of it? So what are some ways that a project team or a company can assess and evaluate the technical competencies of the partners partners they might be considering?
So I'm going to back up here because what you said, you need the technical chops, right? I need somebody who understands the product. But in Microsoft world, we're in this Microsoft cloud now, right? So there's a lot of ways to do things, right? Where am I going to store my data? That's a question that you can answer 3 or 4 different ways. What's the best for me? So I think, look at someone with that technical skill set, but also someone who understands, have a broader understanding of the Microsoft cloud and what components should I bring in to do what? Because they all integrate fairly well together. Also, if you're doing an ERP installation, there's going to be anywhere from 5 to 15 ISV products attached to it. So you need somebody who understands the ISV ecosystem because that's going to save you a lot of time and money on what you need to deploy. So
Right.
it's not as straightforward as do I know how to build everything, because you'll get some partners that want to build everything, right?
Right.
And I think we want to avoid that in this day and age.
Right. Now you mentioned the topic I want to come back that I want to dig into a little bit more, and that is the whole ISV concept. Before I ask you some questions around that, just tell us what is an ISV and how does that unique to the Microsoft ecosystem?
So it's independent software vendor. And in the business applications, it's really, organizations that are in the CRM world. We saw a lot of companies building on the low code engine and building applications, whether in the first party CE application or building something in Power Apps. So with the low code engine, they're building some sort of ISV product that is kind of embedded in the technology. We're also seeing organizations who, have partner relationship management portal, and they just want to attach it, for example. So they write integrations, and they still keep their technology separate, and they attach to the Microsoft technology. So
Gotcha.
it's very interesting world. Now, on another part of that, we've got a group that are pure ISVs where they've got their own technology, but we also have a group called what I call hybrids. And these are partners who are traditionally, I'll call them SI, systems integrators, who have verticalized. And there's some people that have done the wine industry. Another one I was talking to a couple of weeks ago was doing the recipe management, right, for big food companies, right? So they find a vertical and they customize the app to fit that vertical and then sell it as an ISV. So they're still selling you a first party app, but it may be customized in a way where they can drop it right into your business. So it's a complex world, but it's a pretty exciting one right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that is exciting. And how important is it for an organization to consider an ISV, or more specifically, I guess it's not even just that you might want an ISV because it's an ISV and it's different, it's innovative. It's because the ISV has built a product that might be more specific to your industry or your specific needs. How important is that industry experience and flexibility and tailoring of the product for your specific industry?
I think it's something you really need to consider, because they're going to save you a lot of time and a lot of money, and they're also, you're going to get a demo of a finished product.
Right.
Whereas if I go to somebody and they're going to custom build it, I can give you a demo of the product and here's what I'm going to do for you. Or if I go in and I find an ISV who's done the wine industry, I'm looking at what functionality they've built in. And with our technology on the CE side, low code, they can customize that app. So they can give it to you 70% finished and then customize the 30% of what you need. So I think it's becoming more and more important. And that's why we're seeing such a growth in the app source platform that Microsoft's put out there. Because last time I counted, I think we're getting close to 2,000
Hmm.
ISVs.
Okay.
So there's
So
lots of technology, lots of information out there for you to research.
yeah, that's a lot of options. I mean, you look at the 20,000 resellers, a couple thousand of
Yes.
those are going to be ISVs. Do you ever do you ever come across companies or organizations that find an ISV product that they like, but they don't feel like that ISV partner is the ideal implementation partner? In other words, there might be someone else who's like just better. They like the team better. They like the general service competencies better, but they like the product of this ISV provider. Do you ever see a conflict there?
I won't call it a conflict. We're seeing more what we call P2P action out there right now, partner to partner. So the
Okay.
pure ISVs that I talked about before that, we built some technology onto Dynamics. They're looking for partners to implement because they don't want to get tied down into these big projects. And even a lot of the ones that have done hybrid projects prefer to partner with somebody because I'm trying to sell more of these wine industry projects, right? So once we get into a Dynamics installation, then the customer probably wants, I want help with Dynamics, but also what else are we going to be doing with Power Platform? What are we going to do with storage? And then we've got AI, right? So what's the AI outcome, or what do we want to be able to do with AI? So it becomes a much bigger project, and that partner may be attached 2, 3, 5, and forever, right, to that client as they start to build out this technology. Where an ISV really wants to get their application in and kind of move on to the next one.
Right, right. Yeah, makes total sense. That's interesting that partner to partner concept, because you don't see that, or I don't see that a lot in other ecosystems. When I look at other big enterprise tech players, I don't see that often. It's a lot more cutthroat, competitive, siloed, whatever you want to call it. So it's interesting to see there's a little bit more collaboration, which I imagine leads to more innovation and more options for customers that are deploying Microsoft Dynamics.
Yes, and they're more likely to tell you that here's what I do, here's what Eric does. He's a
Right.
specialist. I'll do my piece. I'm going to bring Eric in to do his piece. So I think we're getting more collaboration. And if you go to a Microsoft partner conference like Directions, which is really a partner conference for that mid market group, you know, more's done at the bar at night, right? Because you walk in there and all these business owners are there, hundreds of them, and it's just one conversation after another. So it's very different than other ecosystems this way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very interesting. So what are some emerging trends in the ecosystem of Microsoft Dynamics that businesses should be aware of?
Well, Microsoft's really pushing the AI, and they call it copilots, right? And I think they've got over 100 copilots built today. So
Mm.
that's their big push as a business. But I think from a customer perspective, I'm starting to do some sessions. I do some thought leadership stuff for MS Dynamics World, and we're planning our first Fabric, which is the reporting platform that Microsoft's pushing out there. It kind of spun out of the Power BI world. We've got 3 times as many people showing up for a Fabric event than any other type of event we're doing now. So Fabric's a very hot topic. Also, data is a very hot topic because companies now realize that we want to use something like Fabric to run across our organization to be able to report. We want to also be able to use these AI tools both safely, securely, and have the data make sense. Then I got to clean up my data. So I think we're going to see over the next 3 to 5 years big projects around data and getting their data ready for that next phase of digital transformation.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. And it's, one of the unintended secondary benefits of this whole AI movement, I think, is that focus on data. That's something I think organizations have struggled with for decades. And now all of a sudden, I think organizations are saying, wow, we really do need to focus on our data if we're going to take advantage of and keep up with this artificial intelligence thing that's happening right now in the
And I
marketplace.
think we're going to see more announcements. I saw one this week where Microsoft's partnering with a data provider. So I think we're going to see more and more of Microsoft really partnering and paying attention to how do we get this data into shape so people can leverage these AI tools.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense. What are some of the common mistakes then that you see organizations make when they're choosing a partner or maybe multiple partners? What are some of the pitfalls or advice you would give of people telling them not to do those things when evaluating partners?
I think they don't spend enough time on the we'll call it the soft skills, I suppose, as opposed to the tech chops of the partner, right? We got the
Mm.
technology, but it's really, how are you going to do the initial planning with me, right? How are you going to help me with requirements? This is really tough because, as an MVP, and I've been independent a long time, most of the projects I went into, they wouldn't hire me to do a big project. They usually hired me to do a project that was stuck, right?
Mhm.
People weren't using it in CRM, that's notorious, but a lot of it was just poor requirements and poor design, right? So how are you going to help me with planning? How are you going to help me with requirements and design? I'm sure you can do the build, right? And then what does the user acceptance look like? Like, how are we going to deploy this? How are we going to train on them? And how are we going to make sure that we're successful with this? So I kind of broke it down into segments, and I actually was teaching a course for the User Group Association for a long time around how do you plan a CRM project, and I would just plan it into all these modules. And I think as a client, that's what you need to do. When you're talking to a partner, it's not all about the tech, it's about the total deployment of the app.
Yeah. Let's pull on that a little bit or dig into that a little bit. I mean, you talk about planning and requirements as two threads or competencies that are just as maybe even more important than the technical chops that you talk about. What about, other things, or what are some of the other competencies you want to look for, like around program management or change management training, whatever? Are there other soft, intangible sorts of things you want to be looking at when you're evaluating partners?
From a customer side, there's one other point I want to make is who owns, and I'll talk about Salesforce automation and CRM. Who owns the project? Is it IT or is it business? And if we go to business, who owns it within the business? And when I would go in and there would be a poor deployment or a problem deployment, I'd sit around with some executives and I say, okay, who owns the project? And they would all look at the IT director who would look back at them and go, look at this thing technically runs perfectly. Your people aren't using it type of thing. So I think, planning and building and understanding the team. understanding the team from the internal team who's going to work on this and who's the partner team, like who you're going to bring on this. And one of the things I started doing quite a long time ago, which I really thought helped, was let's look at a project plan. Like, I want you to give me a proposal, but I also want you to give me a project plan. And in that project plan, I need you to kind of detail everything you're going to do for the money, right? That you're asking for me. But I also want another column here saying, what are the requirements from the business? Who am I going to have to provide to work on this and how many hours? Because I think a lot of projects got out of sync or still get out of sync because the partner comes in and says, I'm going to do all this, but the customer can't keep up, right? Because a lot of these people have full-time jobs and they're trying to deploy a CRM system part-time. And they just can't keep up with the project. So things get out of whack, and that becomes trouble because partners start moving resources around. I can't have an architect sitting there, right? This person's costing me a lot of money. I've got to move them on to another project. So that's where things sort of get funny and get out of sync. So really, what's the planning around this? And, we talk a lot about building a center of excellence. What is a center of excellence going to look like that's going to drive a lot of the project and what we do?
Right. Right. And how do you center of excellence is a great term, and it's a great sort of follow up to how do you ensure that, assuming you find the right partner, they're the partner that's going to take you the distance to get you to go live and get you to adopt the technology. How do you transfer some of that knowledge, or what are some tips to ensure that you're not overly dependent on that partner and that you can sustain yourself after that partner leaves? In other words, how do you do that knowledge transfer, and how do you build that center of excellence? Is that something that is that incumbent on the partner to do that for you, or is that incumbent on you, the implementing organization, to figure out how you're going to handle that?
A good partner is going to tell you, right, what you're going to need to run the system. And so I don't do a lot of projects anymore. I kind of do practice management and ISV management, but once in a while I get pulled into a project from the user community. And I'll look at things and I'll say, okay, you're going to deploy this. This is a fairly large deployment. What's your team going to look like post deployment? Who's going to be on it? Right? You need trainers, you need administrators, you need technical people that are part of this project that are going to remain, because this project doesn't have a start and a beginning. This project will continue on. Excuse me.
Right. Right. Yeah, makes total sense.
Sorry, will continue on for months, maybe years. So you've got to kind of treat it that way. And so I did a lot of work with the user group communities over the years, and I'm in Toronto, so I organized the Canadian National CRM user group, and I'm organizing now an enterprise, international, for enterprise customers. So when we do event, right, we just did what we call the Doug Dynamics Con Live in Denver. So I meet people that are very successful, that are on their 3rd or 4th deployment. They'll come to a user group community with their admins who admin the system. They'll come with the technical people that work on the system and the business owner. So the most successful ones show up at the community meetings with, those groups of people, because they're all learning something different, right? And they're talking, and they'll go in and talk to other customers, and the business owner wants to talk to the business, like who owns the project. The technical people, they want to go to the technical deep dive, and the admins want to talk to other admins. So how do you get it going? So I think when you start to build that culture internally, it's very important. And if you find a partner, and there's some good ones out there that'll help you do that, those are the partners you want to work with. The ones that want to kind of give you half the information are the ones that, I'm a little worried about, because it seems that they want you dependent on them for a long time. And I don't think that's the way to go. I think is to get the customer up and running and working with that technology so you can move on to the next deployment, the next project for them.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to create that learned helplessness or that unhealthy dependency on a partner versus just you taking ownership and you being able to sustain that longer term.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what kind of closing advice or tips would you have for businesses that are currently in the process of selecting a partner or reseller or ISV in the D365 space? I mean, what sort of closing tips would you leave us with?
I would really do my due diligence. I'd look in a couple places. I would see, are you involved with the user group communities? Because I find that the best partners are very involved with user groups, right? So they're giving back something all the time. Also, you're going to see, are the employees there long term? Right? How long have they been with you? What's their technical background? And in this Microsoft world, do you have any MVPs working for you? Because that's most valuable professionals, and that can be someone who works for a customer or works for a partner. But companies that invest in their people will have MVPs there. If they're not investing in their people, the MVPs don't stick around, right?
Right.
So, do you have MVPs? And then, let me talk to some of your customers that are like me, the same size as me, the same type of deployment, whether it's local, regional, or international. I want to talk to other ones because maybe you're too big a partner for me. Maybe I just have a small project. I probably need somebody my own size. But if I'm going to be an international deployment, I've got to work with somebody who can support that deployment, whether directly, like work with one of the GSIs, we call them in our space, or do they belong to part of a network? And now there's a lot of these P2P networks popping up of smaller regional partners working together to do international deployments.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you for helping us unpack this whole thing that we call the Microsoft ecosystem. And there's a lot to it. And like I said, there's a lot of choices, a lot of great options in the space. It's just a matter of the difficult part is the fact that it's just a matter of navigating that and trying to figure out which ones are the right fit. So I appreciate your perspective, and you have a pretty unique perspective given that you work with so many of these different partners and you see so many of them throughout your work that you do now. So I appreciate your time here today.
And if people want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I can direct them to a user group community that I think can help them get started, on their Dynamics journey.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, we'll make sure people follow you on LinkedIn. And just for those that are listening to the audio only version, it's Rick McCutcheon, and the last name is spelled McCutcheon. So there's an E in there that's silent, but it's McCutcheon, but with an E in there that makes it sound like McCutcheon, which is how I wanted to pronounce it at first. Is there a website, or how do people find your podcast, Partner Talks?
Partnertalks.com.
All right. Easy enough. Partnertalks.com. Rick McCutcheon, thanks for being here today.
Okay, Eric, thank you for having me, and I hope to be talking to you more about the Microsoft ecosystem in the future.
Likewise. Thank you.